Welcome to another X-Wing Strategy Tips. Today's topic is going to be all about Darth Vader. Now, if you don't have the game or don't know, Darth Vader's card looks like this, and as you can see here, his pilot skill is 9. That's something we're going to be discussing a lot today, and how to actually make the best use of his pilot skill. He is flying the TIE Advanced, which does have a very different sense of movement about it. We'll talk about that in a second. He does have 4 basic actions in his target bar, and that's really important because when you're flying Vader, his special ability, of course, is when you perform an action, you can actually take 2 actions. So basically double the actions out of this one ship. Vader can also carry missiles and has an elite pilot skill, all for 29 points. So this basically puts him in the realm of Wedge, maybe Luke, or maybe Garvin or Biggs with an upgrade or something. It's all about there. However, of all those, most of the time I would actually rather take Vader, and I'm going to explain why. So when you're building a squadron and you take Vader, what you're really getting is this greater sense of flexibility. But those 2 actions really can do a lot of things. And I'm going to show you what I like to do with Vader in my own matchups when I use him. But I'm going to demo this by, first of all, we're going to give Vader a boost action. I think this is probably, in my opinion, the best upgrade you can give to Vader. I have seen people argue for shield upgrades or a stealth device, and I would urge stealth. If I was to pick between those, I think stealth device wins hands down. But because Vader has all these extra actions and is so maneuverable, we just want to get him out of harm's way in general, and rather than just leaving it to the dice, I just want to guarantee getting out of the way with a boost action, if I all can help it. And that pilot skill of 9 works beautifully when you're boosting, because you're going to be able to see where everybody is in the field and then decide what you want to do. Stealth device, I think, is better on high agility, low pilot skill pilots. So if you're having to choose, take boost. Okay, but here's something cool I want you to just notice, because Vader is the only ship in the entire game that can basically do what I'm about to show you. At least that's been released so far. Again, the Wave 3 ships haven't been released yet, but I don't really expect anyone to be able to do this, but I could be wrong. But I have my range ruler out, which, as you may or may not know, actually has a total ship length of 7.5 ships. So it's actually pretty long if you compare it to the 5 movement. You can see it just comes up here to the 2 mark, and it's got an extra 2.5 ship length. So this range ruler is really long. Well, Vader has this property, because he's really half a TIE fighter and half an X-Wing, where he can both go slow and he can go really fast. He's missing some of the hard turn maneuvers, but he makes up for that with the range flexibility. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have Vader just move forward 5, like so. And then we're going to have Vader boost, because I just gave him the boost action. And there we go, like so. And now he gets a second action. He's the only ship that naturally gets a second action in the game. And we're going to use that second action to do a forward barrel roll right here. And I'm not even sure if you can still see Vader on the screen here. I guess he's probably right at the edge of the camera. But Vader got significantly past the distance of the range ruler without any stress. I mean, this is really just with an engine upgrade. So if you need to get Vader in and out of battle very quickly, you have an amazing stride to how far you can actually move him, right? You can actually go probably about, that's probably close to almost, I would say nearly 10 ship lengths. I should actually measure that. But moving 10 ship lengths to this game is pretty unheard of when your basic action is only 5. But it's that extra boost adds an extra, really 2.5 or so, and then barrel roll adds an extra 1, or really 2, I guess. So we almost get to 10 that way. So that's awesome. So if we have Vader with boost, what do we want to do with him, right? We have this one ship that can go really far, really fast, and get out of the way and see what everybody else does first. Well, when I'm playing with Vader, what I tend to do is I tend to have Vader on one side of the board, and you guys can kind of see this over here, and I'm just going to sort of put a mock battle up here in front of you. And first I'll put down some sort of squadron. Vader's going to be the last thing we place, of course. But let's assume that the Empire has to place first. Maybe I'm using a couple ties. So over here, I got a Slave One with Boba Fett and Academy and Backstabber. This isn't a real squadron. Again, I'm just sort of showing the concept here. But some sort of big armada that's going to fly in formation. And then usually the Rebel player will place most of their ships, anything before skill 9. I mean, Boba Fett will be placed later too if I'm using Boba Fett. So let's, here we go, let's put those somewhere down here where you can see them. Maybe they're in a formation. And, I don't know, there's some asteroids and other debris floating here. And I'll want to put Vader on the other side of the table. So, I should get some more asteroids here. Pretend this is an asteroid. There's an asteroid. Alright, so there's some more asteroids we have to fly around. So what's going to happen here is we're going to slowly, you know, on our first turn, move the squadron down the table. And we're going to go pretty fast, probably either at least a 4 with Vader. To program initially at least, we don't know what else we're going to do after them, but at least a 4, and then we're going to see what the Rebel player does. And if the Rebel player comes straight up with Vader, I'm just going to try to keep Vader going. So I'm going to boost this way and maybe barrel roll this way. And just try to keep them out of range. Again, this isn't, I didn't quite set it up to the 3-foot standard tournament length, but conceptually, I want to get Vader basically around the edges of the periphery of the squadron. Now, here's what's going to happen on round 2. This squadron, this person, whoever my opponent is, has to really decide between doing one of 3 things right away, round 2. They can either just head off and take off towards my main fleet for a straight-up head-to-head matchup. They can try to go after Vader and focus fire on Vader. That's going to be more difficult than it looks because of Vader's after 9 pilot skill maneuvers and double actions. Or they can try to split up their force and take some of each off. Those are really only the 3 main options here. Anything else, they're just going to get either pummeled from this way or this way. So they have to choose right now. And in many games, and certainly this is something we say in the game of Go a lot, whenever you're giving your opponents a choice, there's a really high chance of them making a mistake. And if I were playing this Rebel player, this force right here, I think the correct play is to head them all off to the Imperial player most times. Again, it depends on what sort of squadron and what sort of tactics you're using here. But in general, I think you want to, as a Rebel player, use that immense firepower you have at the beginning to try to take out some ships really quickly. And we got to pick them off from the ensemble over here. But if you do this just means Vader's going to have free roam to come up behind you and basically tail either the squadron or select fighters from the squadron for the next couple rounds yet. Again, Vader can travel slowly, unlike most TIE fighters, so it's not like this whole squadron can just break and wait for them to crash. So if you do this, this player knows Vader's going to come right over here and just tail this group while we're focus firing. And once, especially if you're using something like Slave 1, once these squadrons go past each other or crash or whatever they're going to do, Boba Fett's still going to fire. Hopefully, because I'm in squadron, my opponent won't be able to do K-turns beyond me because I'll be occupying an area of the board. I'll be able to fire out the back, and he'll have to deal with Darth Vader while he's turning around, which is more of a nuisance than you might think. Again, when you're stressed, if you're trying to do a K-turn or turn awkwardly, you do not have a very high chance of rolling evades. So we're just making use of Vader's high pilot skill to basically do whatever play the rebels in this case. Let's give you a different scenario. Let's say Vader comes here on the first turn and the rebels decide to pursue Vader. Well, if I don't know what I'm going to do yet, I'm just going to jet ahead with Vader. And what I want these rebels to do is just sort of try to even hard turn this way. And this is actually one of the last games I played. This is exactly what happened. The rebels tried to hard turn to cut Vader off. Vader zoomed by and boosted. And meanwhile, my slow occupying force here is coming right up from their tail. It's going to be firing at them from their behind for the next few rounds. This is a game I won, of course. I mean, this is not a good start to the rebels when they can't fire at anything, and already my main fleet is behind them. They basically got tricked going after Vader, thinking they could just focus fire and take him off the board early. This is one of the things when you use a ship like Vader, people just want to kill it. It feels like this is the renegade, this is the outlaw that, the other stuff is standard stock stuff. It's not very exciting to kill, but this is the one, just, I don't know, for whatever reason, maybe it's just how fast you can go. It just attracts a lot of attention and players go after it. So this is a terrible strategy by the rebels. If, on the other hand, the rebels split up, alright, so we're back here, and so planning round 2, and again, we're still just going to do this with this squadron. We're still just going to move forward with Vader, though my opponent doesn't know that yet. So they might break off some of their squadron and maybe split up this way. Well, Vader's still going forward and then boosting. And this is still really good for the Empire, because now we have a 3-on-2 battle over here, right? They've left 2 of their guys alone. 2 of their guys are still useless. Vader's still going to be able to tail them on the next round, and this is just going very, very well for the Empire. So this is a hard game for the Rebels if you find yourself in the situation with Vader on one side and a fleet on another. It's just really tough to deal with, because again, especially you need boost on Vader if you're going to do this. And you don't even, here's the thing, you could say you don't even need Vader to do this. If you have an A-Wing, especially if it's Tycho with Push the Limit. Again, Tycho isn't going to be able to barrel roll that way, but it'll at least be able to do something like this. Or if you have maybe Tur or Suntur with Push the Limit as well on the Imperial side. They have boost actions built into their ships, so you don't need to add it as an extra engine upgrade. But in my experience, Vader does this job beautifully. The one thing he lacks, of course, compared to Suntur or Tur or any of those interceptors, is really just raw firepower. But again, he kind of makes up for that with that target lock action. And especially by not ever getting stressed, you can guarantee he's going to be able to get up close at some point and get that bonus attack die. So that's one of my favorite things to do with Vader. Let's talk about some of the other things that people like to do with Vader. Some people like to use him as sort of a missile boat, and I'll hear some missiles. Here are some of the most common missiles to put on Vader. You got your standard concussion missiles, basically let you change a blank to an extra hit. An assault missile, this is great for taking out a swarm of ships because it does splash damage. Then we got homing missiles. Homing missiles is probably one of the favorite missiles of members of the community because it doesn't actually spend your target lock. All three are a great choice. It really just depends on what type of squadron you're going up. Of course, if you're going after a swarm, the assault missiles are better. If you're taking out big ships, homing missiles are probably the best. If you are, just sort of caught in between, concussion missiles are also fine. But again, the nice thing about putting missiles on Vader is that pilot skill 9, meaning your opponent moves in range, then you move, then you get to target lock. And again, if you put these on a low pilot skill ship, what's going to happen is you're going to move first, you're going to have to focus, can't take your target lock, then your opponent moves in, and then you never get your target lock because now you're at close range and can't use your missiles. Vader, that's not going to be a problem. And furthermore, the second action gives you that extra focus, means that all of these are pretty potent to use. I don't usually like putting missiles on Vader because, again, I'm using Vader as this decoy renegade outlaw person who's just going to try to blast down the side of the board and wrap around. So missiles may or may not be useful, but in certain, the thing about Vader, again, is it's so flexible. You can use it for whatever you want. If you need someone to just sort of sit in the middle of your squadron and launch missiles, he does that wonderfully well. Some of the other upgrades that people put on Vader, marksmanship you see pretty commonly, but I'm not sure you need it for 3 points. It's great if critical hits are important to you, then by all means. A lot of people recommend Squad Leader, and this is the one that lets you transfer an action. And again, if you're using Vader as a squad mate, he's actually going to fly within your ensemble. I think Squad Leader is a great choice, but again, it depends on what your ships are. If you have a big, honking firepower kind of ship that could use some extra actions, for instance, Slave 1, and maybe Slave 1 has some torpedoes or other heavy weapons on it, and you want to give Slave 1 a target lock and a focus in the same turn, hey, this is how you do it. And then, one of my friends really likes putting Veteran Instincts on Vader. Again, all that I said about, making sure that Vader moves last so he has the best view of the field and can decide what to do. This is just going to put his pilot skill up to 11, just to really help hammer that home. In most cases, it's not going to be necessary against most lists, but if you are playing against, a Han shoots first list, basically a big Millennium Falcon, which is so important, you want to be shooting at as often as you can, so you need to know where it's going. It can be useful. On the other hand, if you're fighting against Millennium Falcon's going to shoot at you no matter where you go, so it might not be that important either. I'm lukewarm to it. So, of those particular upgrades, I'm actually not a big fan of any one of them. Again, for me, it's all about the boost action here and getting Vader behind the enemy. I can certainly see, again, if I want to use Vader differently, I'll use one of those more elite pilot skills to help out his squad teammates. I do want to take one more minute here and address the people who would put Push the Limit on Vader. I'll put Push the Limit here on the screen so you guys can all see. This is one of the best elite pilot upgrades in the game. It does come with the A-Wing expansion. And there are some very natural homes for this card, like on Tycho, who doesn't receive stress, or stress doesn't bother his actions, or on one of the elite interceptors that get bonuses when they get stressed. Those are all good choices for it. But, you know, there are people who also want to give Vader a third action, right? Vader already has 2, push the limit will give him 3, although at the cost of stress. And there are 2 points I want to make about putting this on Vader. Number 1, make sure you remember, if you do give Vader a third action, he cannot take the same action twice. So he can't boost and then boost, or barrel roll and barrel roll, right? That's against the game rules. Or evade for that matter. I mean, any of them. And so when you are taking a third action, you are starting to limit what actions you do get to get. And you know, it's not that it's not useful, but it's not amazing in the sense that I think people think it is. It's definitely useful, but the problem is stress. And my Vader, I do not really ever want him to get all that stressed. Vader's dial, it does have, I think, 4 greens on it. Yeah, so 1 straight, a 2 straight, and then the 1 bank and a 1 bank this way and that way to remove stress. And, you know, while those are all very valid maneuvers, you know, I don't want to be required to them. Again, I want my Vader to be incredibly, you know, I just want him to go wherever he wants, basically, wherever he needs to go at that point in time to go help out or do what he needs to do. So I really don't like a stressed out Vader, even though he doesn't have the hardest time getting rid of his stress, unlike maybe like a Y-Wing or something. So anyway, if you are playing Vader with at least an engine upgrade, this is going to set you back 1/3 of your entire squadron in a 100-point game. This is 33 points. So the question becomes, is it worth it? And again, I think, you know, in my opinion, I think the game is actually surprisingly well balanced. You know, I'm in shock at how often there are evenly matched squads out of all different cards and ships and abilities that have been released. They're definitely combos, things that work with a little bit more synergy. But you know, that being said, the game is really well balanced. But we still have to answer the question: is Vader worth it? You know, there's one bad thing about this, about taking Vader, especially with a boost upgrade. You're only looking at getting 2 attack dice. And, you know, that's not a lot. That's definitely not going to be enough to win you the game. You really need some other sort of force to come through and give you a little bit more firepower. And in games I play with Vader, I make sure that I have a squadron that can focus fire and do a lot of damage to one ship very quickly. Usually revolves around a Slave 1 with a bunch of ties, some sort of Slave 1 squadron, as many as I can get in there for the remaining 67 points. Also, in that type of squadron, I'm also more likely to take a Bounty Hunter just to save on extra points and hopefully get an extra TIE Fighter out. So again, Vader doesn't bring it when it comes to damage. That's the one knock. You're using a lot of points as a distraction, and in that case, you know, if your opponent's a really good opponent and you know, maybe ignores Vader for a little bit or knows he's not going to do a lot of damage really quickly and really takes out your more offensive capabilities, well, you know, good for them. But I've definitely found against, you know, medium to weaker opponents that, you know, Vader, it's almost a psychological game. His benefit's almost more, you know, in the enemy's head than he is a real offensive threat. So that's the one knock against him. If you do play with Vader with a bunch of other defensive ships, again, I would never play that type of squadron in a tournament per se, because, man, when you're on a time limit, 60 or 75 minutes, you need to rack up points quickly, so you don't just get partial wins, so you can make it to the finals. And, you know, Vader may or may not do that for you. So in general, in tournaments, I tend to veer towards more offensive ships. And I actually generally like the Rebels more in tournament settings for that reason. I know if I'm going to play a Rebel versus Rebel game, the game's going to end. It's not going to be a partial win either way. Whereas if you've played an Empire versus Empire mirror match before, some of those can be pretty long. If the green dice are rolling well, it's got some longevity issues on all the ships. It can be hard to take out a squadron with only 2 attack dice. So I'll leave it up to you. Again, the game is really well balanced. I'm just showing you what I like to do with Vader, and perhaps make one of the most best psychological uses for him is really just sort of getting behind your opponent and you know, making him worry. That's really what we're going for.